Welcome to Chat with Sonlight, a homeschool podcast. Spend a few minutes each week catching up with Sonlight. Connect with other homeschoolers for encouragement, tips, and fellowship from around the globe. Plus, we'll explore some of the behind-the-scene happenings at Sonlight and take a deep dive into your favorite homeschool products. Each week, we'll chat with Sonlighters just like you, new homeschoolers, homeschool bloggers, Sonlight employees and advisors, veteran homeschoolers, and even Sarita Holtzman. Like Sonlight's curriculum offerings, we will explore homeschooling through the lens of a literature-based, Christ-centered education. Join us for everything you might be interested in, from organizing your homeschool, connecting with others, and details on literature-based learning.
Hi, welcome to today's podcast. We are talking to Beverly Jacobson, a Sonlight family, and they have a precious daughter, Verity, that was diagnosed with Trisomy 18. I've invited her to come and join us on Chat with Sonlight just to talk about being a homeschool family, a Sonlight family on top of that, and what a precious gift that Verity is. Beverly, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. We are happy Sonlight users. We've been using Sonlight since 2005, which is when we first started homeschooling our oldest daughter. We have 9 children altogether, and our oldest has been married for a few years now and is expecting her second baby. So it's really exciting to kind of be on a little bit on this side of things, but we do have our youngest one, Verity, is 6 years old. So we have 3 that we have launched, and then actively homeschooling 5. And then sweet Verity has very significant, profound, developmental disabilities and physical disabilities. So she has been an unexpected blessing at the kind of the tail end of our childbearing years. We actually did not set out to have a big family. We thought we would have 2 or 3 kids, and then then God just took us on a whole other journey during it was actually our first year of homeschooling. I had my first miscarriage, and that really rocked my world. I didn't really know things like that happened. It wasn't really talked about as much back then. But that really started my husband and me on this journey of asking the Lord, seeking him in scripture and learning his heart for the family, for children, and ultimately paving the way for us to say, okay, God, whatever you want for our family, we're open to that. And so the homeschooling adventure all became part of the family adventure with welcoming new babies and ultimately preparing us for the day that we would learn that our unborn baby had this life-limiting condition. And having lost a couple babies by that point to miscarriage, that was just that next step in grief and processing all of that through the pregnancy. But when I look back, I have the advantage now of being on the other side of some really significant trauma, depression and so on associated with the diagnosis, and then not sure what it would look like to bring her home. Now I just see the joy and just the absolute blessing that the Lord has given us in her sweet little life. And it's all the more beautiful because of having gone through that hardship.
Could you, I know some of our listeners are fully aware that I know what Trisomy 18 is. Could you define Trisomy 18 for those of us who it's just not part of our everyday lingo?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was brand new to me as well. I had heard of Down syndrome, and I think I was vaguely aware that Down syndrome is also trisomy 21, so that extra 21st chromosome. So when I heard the words Edwards syndrome and trisomy 18, I didn't immediately make that connection, but now it does make sense that trisomy is a triple. It's an extra chromosome, and then 18 is the 18th chromosome is the one that is affected. So it's genetic conditions really are on a spectrum. We often think of autism as children can be on a spectrum. It's a similar kind of thing where there may be a lot of similarities with children affected by a trisomy, whether it's 21 or 18. It really can be any chromosome that is affected, but the more common ones would be 21, 18, and 13. And then there are some others in there, but it was scary because all we heard was the term, genetic abnormalities and the terminology used, around the ultrasound and what they would be looking for, the markers, and so on. It is scary because it's framed in that language of what's wrong with your baby. And then, kind of piecing through, well, what does that mean? What can we do? Can we do anything? How do you go through the rest of your pregnancy now with this weight on your shoulders of being unsure? Okay, how can we care for this kind of a child? But at the core, to answer your question, trisomy 18 is simply an extra chromosome, and then that brings with it just a range of complexities. So for Verity specifically, she had both of her feet were clubbed, and then clenched fists, so really tightly closed fists that it took her a long time to be able to open and close her fingers. And then we were fortunate. I hesitate to say fortunate, but the Lord really worked some miracles in her life. She was born with 3 holes in her heart, and we thought she would need heart surgery, but he miraculously started closing up the holes. She's never needed heart surgery. She does have a G tube for her nutrition. So she's 6 years old and has only had tastes by mouth, but she is not able to sustain herself by eating on her own. And then she needs complete assistance with all of her ADLs, we call them, the activities of daily life. So bathing and changing and moving. She's non-ambulatory at this point, but we're doing lots of therapies, and we have big dreams for her to be able to walk someday.
Okay, that's awesome. That is awesome. My grandbaby Parvana had very similar. She had clenched hands and it was floppy. So she had to be on the breathing machine all the time.
Okay. Yep.
If you took it off, she couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And then she also had a hole in her heart.
Wow. Yeah.
Let me ask you, Beverly, when I'm going to just kind of step forward a little bit, because obviously you had a team there where she was born that was able to rally around and go forward. And
yes,
part of helping these children forward is having that medical team at the beginning. How did the family, what was the adjustments for your family?
Oh, that is a good question, because it really profoundly changed our entire family, as you can imagine. And this really turns things upside down. I remember so clearly the day I got the phone call from the doctor. I was absolutely not expecting anything like that, but we had already begun our homeschool day. So I remember all the kids were around the kitchen table. We always started with Bible, any memory verse work, Bible time, and prayer. And we would do that around the breakfast table. And it was really the one time that we could have all of us together because of the big age range. I had teenagers, doing their own chores in their bedrooms and checking in with me, but they were there. And so when Mom got the call, they heard my side of it. And then of course I was flooded with emotion, and we're a very open family. We talk through so many things. It's one of the beautiful things I love about our Sonlight materials and the discussions that they can foster. But I remember telling them, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that God is good and God is sovereign. And whatever happens next, we know we can trust him. And then I just started bawling. I just, was able to get those words out. And it was, it set the tone, I think, for being able to talk even to our little ones who didn't really understand what was going on, but being very open about the fact that there could be something going on with our unborn baby. And we didn't know that she was a girl at this point. We don't know if we're going to meet your baby brother or sister alive. And so then when we went through the ultrasound and going through, more intricate look at what was going on and getting that confirmation that, okay, this is what we're dealing with, we just shared with the kids everything that we were learning. And I'm an open book, I can't hide my emotions. And so there would be times mom was just crying on the couch and, mommy can't read right now. And so you're going to read to mommy. And we just kind of shifted a little bit into survival mode because there was so much to process. And my husband was dealing with it in his way and coming, I remember he came home one day and told me that he had been researching burial plots and where would we, put her to rest, because we really thought at that time that was going to be our path. And he had grown up in Denver and had gone to the Air Force Academy. And we were stationed in Nebraska at the time, in Omaha, living in Iowa, but he had researched and said we could bury her on the Air Force Academy property. That's a heart-wrenching conversation to have, to hear your husband say that. And then I remember talking to the kids after we got confirmation of her diagnosis. And in our family, the name of the baby has always been a big, fun secret. Nobody could know it except mommy and daddy until the day of the birth. But this time, because we didn't know what was going to happen, we shared with the kids the name, and we chose Verity Irene. Right. Verity, of course, from Veritas, that the truth, that we felt called to speak truth through her story, whatever God was going to write in her story, that the truth was she was created in the image of God, just like all of our other kids, just like all of us. And the truth is her life is valuable. It might look different, but it is absolutely valuable and has purpose. It's not a mistake. So Verity, and then Irene is her middle name. Peace. It means peace. And we just really felt the peace of the Lord despite the uncertainty. So it just was kind of taking it day by day. And then when we brought her home from the hospital, which again, this was a shock. Nobody really expected that this would be our course, but here we were. We had a fragile baby, suction machine, oxygen, pulse oximeter, feeding tube, all the things that seemed so scary. But I was so amazed at how everybody just rallied around, and some of the kids felt comfortable, working with the G tube, and they were able to put give her water flushes, and others were a little bit scared about that, but they would help in other ways. And I'm not going to lie, it was a hard year of adjustment when we brought her home. We all had to learn how to live with very little sleep, and the possibility that she could pass, because again, we were told that she probably wasn't going to make it to her first birthday. So there was that level of stress that I don't think we really understood how deeply it affected us until kind of after. And we're still digging through some of that, but God's grace has just been so amazing to cover us in our weaknesses. Because I know we dropped the ball on a lot of things, but our kids have grown in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I see how God has been using that and getting to hear them share their own testimonies in youth group or in other opportunities. And they share about their baby sister and what that was like for them. And that is just, I don't even have words to hear,
I was gonna say,
how God has used that.
Yeah, one of the things as I prepared for this, I almost started crying while you were talking, but it was, God opened up so many eyes in our lives. I mean, and as grandparents, I was like, and like you said, God's sovereign. And we're at peace with this, we knew that he had a plan and that she was just as valuable as any other person taking.
Yes.
And that was never a doubt in our mind, but just to see even our shift of putting a focus on where he is sovereign over all things.
Yes.
All of a sudden, like the whole family seemed to be, God's in charge. God's my husband's song during that time was Even If.
Oh, yes. Ours too. One of ours. Yep.
And I read that in his journals and stuff, and I'm like, oh, he was in tune. He was right. He was right.
Hmm.
So before we talk about Verity Village, just tell me, how does a school day look like,
Hmm.
balancing all the kids, possible grandbaby thrown in on a time or two, and Verity and all her needs?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, that first year was craziness, but about 8 months into her life, the Lord brought our first nurse into our home. And I didn't even know that we could qualify for nursing, so I remember that first year we brought Verity home, and it was in the fall. We're a military family. We're retired now, but we had just had another military move. So we're in a brand new community and trying to do life with Verity. And I was crying, and I was searching online for educational options for my kids, especially for my teenagers, because I did not think that I could do high school with them. It was literally all I could do to keep Verity alive. I could not leave her alone. She was an aspiration risk. There was a lot of vomit and suctioning needed on a almost hourly basis. Um, and I was just crying. I remember crying out to the Lord and saying, I cannot do this. I'm failing my kids. And that day, it's as ingrained in my mind as the day that we got the diagnosis. I don't even remember how I came out of that, but I remember telling the Lord, if you want me to do this homeschooling thing, you have got to change something, because I can't do this. And I was literally at the end of my rope. And then I don't remember the exact timing, but we started getting phone calls, and we had an interview with a home health care agency. And I had not even looked into this. In my mind, we couldn't afford a private duty nurse. I didn't know how this all worked. Now I know there are resources in place, and the Lord just took care of us. It was nothing that I did because I didn't know it existed. But before I knew it, we were interviewing, having a meet and greet with a lady who turned out to be a believer. And the other thing is, I was a little nervous having someone come into my home. And I mean, we're a homeschool family. I don't know what that looks like. I know there's some craziness out there, but she saw what we were doing and she affirmed me. She said, this is so great. I wish I had known about this when my kids were growing up. And she spoke blessings to me. She was a blessing to me, because Verity was taken care of during those crucial months when she was so tiny and fragile. And I had time to breathe, and I could sit on the couch with my littles, and we could go through our favorite Sonlight books that by this point were starting to fall apart because they've been through, many children by this point. And I could have some time to talk to my teenagers about, okay, what are you learning from the Westminster Catechism and history of the Christian church, or, the government that my senior was doing at the time. It was truly the Lord. And I see his favor and this is not like, I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but Sonlight was such an important part of that. They're not paying me to say that, y'all. But Sonlight and the way that our family had set up our rhythms, our routines, the way that Sonlight helped me kind of check the boxes, because there's that part of me that I want to check the boxes, but at the same time, it's so rich and so full. I gave myself lots of grace to not do everything. I guess it was a healthy balance for me, that I could open up the schedule. I didn't have to pre-plan anything, because the Lord knows I didn't have time to pre-plan anything, but we could just take the moments that we had, sit on the couch or sit in a teenager's bedroom, and I could dialogue with them. It was such a precious time that, even though I was desperate and I was really, I was needy, and I know my kids were needy, there wasn't enough of us to go around. And yet somehow I look back on that year and think, this is what we needed. We needed Jesus to be the one that my kids leaned on, not mom and dad. And I needed to be reminded of that too, that it is in my weakness that his strength shows up. And Sonlight was a tool that helped us get through really, that was the hardest year of homeschool for any of us. And so now Now our days do look different because I've launched a few. I only have one high schooler, and she is very different from her older siblings, as I know any parent understands that. They're also different. And then my younger four, it's a different dynamic. I'm not nursing a baby on the couch. I'm not trying to grab a toddler, out of the dishwasher. It's a different season of life, and it looks different. And every now and then I grieve just a little bit because my older ones had a different experience than my younger ones are. But again, it brings me back to the feet of Jesus, and he knows exactly what those kids need. And he knows the conversations that they need to be part of with their siblings. And so now things look a lot more relaxed. I am so much less stressed than I was, when I was only homeschooling 2 or 3 kids. I was very uptight and very much a box checker. And God has really changed me to be more gracious, more slowing life down and savoring the moments and realizing what is truly important.
I was gonna say, I think that comes with having one. It does come with having your 8, 9 kids. I only have 4, but people will say, "Oh, you're so relaxed," and I'm like, "Well, I have 4. I don't have just 1 or 2."
Right. Yes.
Our own party. A lady told me when I was pregnant with the 4th one, "You will forever be a party. You are no longer just 4. You are a
Right.
6."
Party of yep.
Join us next week as we continue our conversation with Beverly Jacobson about Verity's Village. Thank you for joining us today. Do you have an idea for a podcast topic, or do you want to chat with Sonlight on an upcoming episode? Email us at connections@sonlight.com.